World Bank Group. I'm delighted to chair this inaugural webinar on celebrating women in AgTech, alongside a terrific group of women leaders. This webinar is part of the World Bank's Data-Driven Digital Agriculture series. It comes just prior to International Women's Day. In this series, we invite innovators, thought leaders, and the World Bank Group's task team leaders to think and act on transforming agriculture and food systems to use data-driven and digital solutions. This webinar is recorded and will be available on the World Bank Open Learning Campus, which is olc.worldbank.org. We want this to be interactive. We have a placeholder for Q&A, so please start asking questions now through the chat function of WebEx and keep them up during the presentations and the moderated discussion. Today's discussion brings together two things I'm passionate about. First, AgTech. It's now driving radical innovations that are helping to improve productivity, solve large climate challenges, enhance supply chain efficiency, and provide smallholder farmers with access to finance, all while improving resiliency of the global food production ecosystem. Second, women empowerment as founders and CEOs of disruptive tech businesses, and actually increasing their ability to raise venture capital at parity with that of men. IFC has been investing alongside these themes for a while, and we have a fast-growing portfolio in the AgTech space. Where does my passion for these two things come from? Well, about 40 years ago, I was growing up in a very rural farming and ranching community in Montana, here in the US. Everyone I knew farmed, and every mother and every father I knew was involved in the operation. I noticed during that time that men tried to accomplish their tasks with brute strength or force. The women, however, used intuition and innovation to solve big problems on the farm. The women were the big innovators, and they were the micro-entrepreneurs that I grew to respect. Yet 4 decades later, just 7% of AgTech investments and 3% of what's been a record haul of capital going into the sector went to female-founded teams. In fact, AgTech trails many other tech subsectors in this gender disparity that is endemic to funding entrepreneurs globally. The goal of today's webinar is to make an impact on changing this outcome. It's to learn from a set of fantastic leaders on what has worked and what hasn't, and how we can come together to make a change. The IFC has invested in a wide variety of tech business models, more than 2,000 in all. We've also been focused on investing in underrepresented founders. And through it all, we've grown quite focused on AgTech and its role in productivity, logistics for input and output, access to finance, and climate. We've invested in businesses that are measuring soil DNA to optimize fertilizer and pesticide use, businesses that are delivering transparency of pricing and reduced waste on farmers' outputs, businesses that are using transformational Internet of Things connectivity to optimize drip irrigation, and to do so by forming communities of smallholder farmers to scale those technology solutions. We've invested in a deep tech company that had developed an organic food-based coating that can extend the shelf life of fruits and vegetables 4 to 6 times longer without the need of refrigeration or a cold chain. And we've invested in businesses that are applying artificial intelligence and machine learning to optimize permanent tree crops in places like Brazil, to not only do the MRI equivalent on trees to reduce disease, reduce overwatering, but also to improve productivity and measuring output. We're focused on developing these ecosystems across the world, but with our key focus being obviously in emerging markets. We're also focused on trying to provide better access to women entrepreneurs, for example, through our ScaleX initiative in partnership with WeFi. I'm excited to hear from the talented team we have assembled for today's discussion. And it's about ready for me to turn over the discussion to our panelists, discussants, and our moderator. Joining us today, I'm delighted, is Ponzi Treviset, the CEO and director of Inara, a seed company using breakthroughs in genomic and computational science to transform plant breeding while reducing need for natural or waste of natural resources. Also with us is Mariana Vasconcelos, CEO and co-founder of AgroSmart in Brazil. AgroSmart uses big data, sensors, cloud climate data to optimize farmers' productivity. And finally, last but not certainly least, we're joined by Johanna Hartung, project lead in Ghana for the German Corporation for International Cooperation and Development, who's been focused on the benefits of digitization for pretty much her entire career. Our discussant today for today's discussion is Dina Umali Deininger, Agricultural and Food Practice Manager for East Asia and Pacific at the World Bank. And our moderator is my fellow World Bank Group conspirator and colleague, Leslie Go. She's the World Bank Senior Technology Advisor, and she's the former Chief Technology Officer of the World Bank Group. With that, I will turn it over to our first presenter. Ponzi, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Bill. Good morning, everyone, and thanks again, Bill, for the very kind introduction. So I'm Ponzi Trivisvavet, CEO of Inari. I will briefly pace through a short slide deck of just 6 slides here. The first will give an overview of our corporate ambition, then we'll followed by an explanation of our platform and how it works to generate products, and then I will end on the team. So we have trademarked a 2-word combination to summarize precisely what we do. At Inari, we are the seed design company. We're compelled by the idea of using the existing genetic diversity in plants to address some of really big global challenges. And it is this diversity that is the starting point for our work. The corn kernel you see pictured here is iconic, and I'm sure you recognize that. As simple as it looks on the outside, genetically speaking, there's a lot packed inside. For a start, it is twice as complex as the human genome. This plant species has been cultivated for 10,000 years, the last 80 years more intensively, and it is now the biggest crop globally. And over the past 25 years, it has been even further technified. And yet, in many ways, we have just only scratched the surface in terms of unlocking its full potential, which Inari is now poised to do. Our ability to make targeted and direct edits of the genome will confer the benefits not only to farmers, but consumers and the planet, a triple benefit, if you will. So I mentioned that the overarching goal of our company is to help catalyze a transformation of the global food system and put it on a truly sustainable path. On this slide, we want to draw a clear and direct linkages between our vision for the future food system on the left and Inari's role in creating it on the right. Seeds are the starting point for most of the calories consumed around the world, either directly for food or indirectly for animal feed. Inari has already demonstrated the great potential of multiplex editing to solve feeding the world challenge. But it's not simply about producing calories. The quality and nutrition of our food are also vitally important, while at the same time ensuring that it can be done sustainably by improving planetary health. And for the first time, it is entirely possible, and we believe it will be must-haves for all farmers and stakeholders. And finally, we are aware that almost half the global population live in rural and farming communities, and that the benefit of these technologies will have a direct and profoundly positive impact on their lives. Our commercial approach will democratize access to technology through our seed network, which consists of independent seed companies around the world. So on this next slide, we summarize our seed design platform, which is our real point of distinction. Starting with our technology, which has 2 distinctive steps. First, we call it software. It flows from our deep understanding of the genome, enabled through predictive design and deep learning algorithms. We then decide the targeted changes that we want to make to the plant, essentially creating a blueprint. Second, we called it hardware. We used our proprietary tools we have developed to make changes themselves. And what is unique about Inari is our ability to make multiple changes to the plant at the same time, something which today takes the industry many years of trial and error using the existing technologies. The products which result from this work are developed much more quickly and much less expensively than the industry norm. The real leverage, though, which I will detail a bit later, is the change in the performance of the plants themselves, in yield, as well as the amount of other inputs that are required. In addition, our first set of products have already been confirmed by the USDA as non-regulated. That means non-GMO, as we do not utilize foreign genes. Our commercial strategy is clear and has already been deployed with independent seed companies who then take the product directly to farmers. This approach can be used across crops and countries. Finally, which I'll come back later as well, is the team at Inari, which has deep experience in seeds as well as in the cutting-edge biotech science. This slide is an example of our product in the pipeline. Inari is redesigning soybean plant architecture. What farmer will see is that after they plant the Inari seed, as the plant grows, it will have many more pods on each branch. And each one of those pods will contain more seeds. And each and every one of these seeds will have consistent seed size and weight, which are highly desirable features. The upshot is that farmer will have 20% more soybean yield per acre, which is an enormous increase in an industry which has shown well less than 1% yield increase per year for many decades. What is less obvious visually, but very obvious to the farmer, is that this will be done while holding constant other farm costs, such as spraying applications, fertilizer, and water, all of which themselves are costly to farmer. So what would be clear win for the farmer when applied to the food system at scale will be radical. You can see here, using US soybean architecture as an example, the impact of 20% yield boost per acre, which is the graph on the left. This in turn result in an 8-fold increase in value to the farmers, which you see in the center. And when we project that over the soybeans planted in US and Brazil, it will allow more than 30 million acres of farmland to be rewilded back to nature. And this is an example of a direct and positive change to the global food system. And this is not a theoretical idea. We have already progressed one of these products into the field. I want to finish by making a few comments about Inari team. The total number of employees now in the company is 170 across our 3 sites in Cambridge, Massachusetts, West Lafayette, Indiana, and Ghent, Belgium. And half of our team are women. This slide shows both the leadership team and our scientific strategy board. The current leadership team is deeply experienced, collectively with over 100 years in seed industry. On the scientific strategy board, I will accurately summarize it as Dream Team. The first 3 individuals on the left each played an important role in the discovery of CRISPR itself. Jennifer Doudna having recently won the Nobel Prize for her work. What is great about that they are highly engaged with our science throughout the year and play a key ongoing role in our scientific progress. In summary, Inari is the preeminent company focused on designing and developing powerful seeds, one that can create significant value to farmers and seed companies, while also making important contributions to the planet and the sustainability of the global food system. And I'm looking forward to have the deeper dialogue after the other 2 presentations. Thank you.
Mariana, over to you.
Yeah, go ahead, Mariana.
Thank you. One second. First page. Sorry. Can you see my screen now? Okay, is it in full screen? Because for me, it doesn't seem like it's in full screen.
Yeah.
It is? Okay.
It's
good.
not in full screen.
Yeah, now it is. Okay, good. Well, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and learn more about the work I have been following on Ponzi. That is amazing. I think we need everyone's input to change the food systems. I'm CEO and co-founder at AgroSmart. We are an AgTech based out of Brazil. And we started this company coming from farming families. I'm daughter of farmers, and I followed up very closely their daily challenge to decision-making in the field. And we wanted to help them to shift from their intuition and copying the neighbors in order to decide what to do, to use data to adapt and be more resilient. And the way the platform works follows the digital transformation journey of the farmer. So we understand the first step is to have data. In emerging countries, that's a huge challenge, as there's too low access because education levels, financing access, connectivity and infrastructure, and so on. So the first thing we do is like to have an IoT solution where we use sensors in the field, and we have our own connectivity solution that mix different technologies to be able to collect data no matter where we are. And we combine that data from the sensors with satellite imagery. We have our own field notebook where we have like checklists to register any activity in the field and input usage and so on, according to the sustainability framework. So the first value proposition is to have data, and to have data organized in one place. When we are there, the second step is like, what do we do with that data? As like farmers are not ready to just have a bunch of data in their hands and deciding what to do. So we support them on how to use that data for making decisions. And we have 3 proprietary algorithms, starting with irrigation. Brazil had a severe drought in 2015, so we wanted to help farmers to better use the water resource and be able to comply with the regulation. So we tell them every day how much to irrigate based on real-time plant conditions in the field. And with that, we were able to save up to 60% of water, 40% of energy costs, and increase yield in up to 20%. So it's a very interesting development of our work, because we were able to both save resources at the same time we increase yield, and that generates a higher profit per hectare for the farmer. The second model we worked on was our own weather forecast. As in emerging countries, many times that's a challenge. Because of the lack of data, the precision of the current models are very low. So we run our own weather forecast in smaller grids, and we have the most assertiveness in Brazil for the 7 days, which is the weather forecast that allows farmers to plan better their operations, their sowing, their spraying or harvesting operations. And with the weather forecast, we were able to advance in predictive models. So we now are working on predicting disease and pests. We have launched a coffee rust forecast model. Coffee is a very important crop for Brazil. We are the largest producer and exporter, and the coffee rust is one of the main diseases that affect farmers and causes losses in the field. So we help them with 15 days in advance to know if there is a risk of having the disease, and helping them to adapt their spraying operation. With that, we were able to reduce the instance of the disease from 30% to an average of 3% in the field. And that means more bags per hectare and less usage of inputs. Now we are advancing with other crops besides coffee, like soybean and barley. And besides our own knowledge and what we are bringing to with these algorithms to the farmers, we allow them to make use of their own knowledge. So like we have an alert tool that allows farmers or agronomists to create a trigger and be alerted any time in their WhatsApp of something that is going to happen, like frost alert or a sowing day alert, or fires alerts. When we had the fires in Amazonia, that became a very demanded tool, so everyone could be alert on the real-time conditions and the forecast conditions so they can act on time. So with that, we even have like people using our tool to provide consultancy to other people in the field. And that's like the layer on the platform where we are handling the farmer themselves directly. But we understood that many times for us to generate the impact we wanted, we had to engage the corporations, because the farmer is many times following something that has been instructed either by input companies or the food companies in the field. So we work across the food supply chain, and the same data we generate and allow farmers to make a decision, we also feed that information to the supply chain entirely. So we work with input companies using our data to orient their R&D. So like when they are developing a new seed variety or they are testing it in different fields, how they can compare the data to understand better product performance. And many times that creates opportunities for bundles where we can make digital offers to improve the efficiency of the inputs in the field. We work with food and beverage companies that are sourcing from farmers, and that's where we are able to tackle the smallholder farm. So we operate in a shared economy model where the company subsides the system, and we deploy the sensors and the networks that supports many farmers around the region, and each farmer is helped individually while we support the corporation to understand their impact, like water footprint, carbon footprint, allocate labor, as we usually have like very few agronomists to support hundreds of farmers, and to create a resilient strategy. As climate is changing, farmers have to adapt each day on how to continue to produce. And that's how our data is being used by them and the corporations. And lastly, we recently started working with the finance sector, with banks, to mitigate their risk with data and create more accessible products. For example, the penetration of credit and insurance is still very low, and by having the data, we help the banks to price better their products and access better market. And we see this very strongly evolving now to green finance, to green bonds and carbon credits and so on, because it's the same kind of data that we are having on the field that can fit all of that system. And as a unique proposition, we believe that it's exactly being in the center of the whole supply chain. It allows us to have a systemic view and help data flow so we can achieve faster and better, more yield at the same time that we have sustainability and traceability to aggregate value to the farmer, and perhaps balance better the risk and return proportion that they have in the field. Just a little bit of more like tangible things. So here's are some of our sensors. As I mentioned, like connectivity is a big barrier. 76% of the farms in Brazil do not have internet in the field, and that's a reality in other Latin American, African, and Asian countries. So yeah, allowing the data to come even when we have that restriction is very important, so we can build the models that can be accessed by them in a very simple way. We are considered an impact company. We address different SDGs because of the direct impact on reducing water, energy input, on increasing yield, and by having created this unique framework that helps smallholders to be engaged and create a resilience for the whole supply chain. We are a member of the UN Global Compact. We are a tech pioneer company by the World Economic Forum, and in this year we received the recognition in Latin American out of 500 businesses in 19 countries as an impact badge, as we are also measuring our impacts in the day-to-day of those farmers. So for me, it's very important to be coming from a farming family in a countryside region and being able to create a tech company to help support my community and the food systems in general and be able to access capital. So I feel very grateful to be able to be sharing our story here alongside other amazing women. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariana. Johanna, you're next.
Yes, so good afternoon. I'm from Accra, from Ghana. I'm based in years here, working for the German Development Corporation, AZ. And in Ghana, like in many other sub-Saharan African countries, agriculture plays an important role for the economy, contributing nearly 20% to GDP. And I'm the West Africa lead for Make IT, a project that supports tech startups and strengthens the wider innovation ecosystem. And I'm very passionate about the role of women in technology, and helped Germany in 2017 during the G20 presidency to put also the topic on the agenda. So it's an honor for me to be here today to discuss with such amazing women. But I hope that in some years, the role of development partners will go down in powerful knowledge. Perhaps will arise on the continent. So I'd like to briefly present the three role models. That is Alima from Kautripe. She's the best known female AgTech founder in Ghana. And Kautripe provides on-demand and subscription-based animal vaccine delivery services to farmers, mainly in the northern part of Ghana. Cynthia, she's also Ghanaian from Trustee Farm. Trusted Farm is a digital marketplace that consumers and consumers verify the quality of the farm produce. And Vivian is Kenyan from Formula, and which creates a direct connection between farmers and businesses using an automated process to increase. And Cynthia and Vivian, both of them have participated in the Tech by Her Accelerator program implemented last year, and I will come back to that later. So these three women work at the intersection of three very male-dominated areas in sub-Saharan Africa, and this is also why there are only few of them. So traditionally, women play a role all along the agricultural value chain in Africa, but their access to productive resources, such as land and credit facilities, is very limited. There's also a gender gap in access and use of technology in sub-Saharan Africa, and the world of business angels and venture capitalists is mainly a men's world on the African continent managed to secure investments. So the barriers are therefore triple, and it is great to have some outstanding examples, but as one female founder once put it, very lucky. I should not depend on luck or exceptional circumstances. Every woman should have the same opportunities to go into the sector for the business funding. So for us as development partners, a lot to do. There are big opportunities, also challenges for AgTech, and both have a gendered dimension. So areas of land are uncultivated. The majority of people on the African continent work in agriculture. So table is effective methods and enhanced productivity towards food security. And the table is particularly big for women in agriculture. Norms have largely confined to their homes, and digital tools can allow them factory inputs despite these restrictions. And then there is another opportunity that's the ability of women via digital tools to organize and work collectively. On the other side, there are a couple of challenges. On the demand side, the technology use of end users in many African countries is very low and uninformed. Many farmers are old because young people have migrated from rural areas, and the digital readiness and infrastructure provision in rural areas is very low. That means that the relative uptake of technology, particularly among women farmers, is very low. On the supply side, the challenges are related to the availability of data and sustainable business models. What Mariana mentioned earlier about that successful AgTech solutions require a wide access to data, from remote sensing to farmer-specific data, but that these data are limited on the African continent, and specifically gender disaggregated data remains sparse. Many AgTech service models focus on the last mile access, relying on field agents on the African continent, and are therefore not so easily scalable. So overall, when it comes to gender dimension, companies are not sufficiently prioritizing gender as part of their product design, marketing, and user engagement. And there is this strong argument that having females in the founding team can change that. While we identified a couple of ethnic IT areas where we see that there is a need for development partners and governments to come in, and of course also investors. So providing mentorship, peer-to-peer exchange among women in AgTech is very crucial to accompany them on the journey. And according to Women in Tech Africa, an important organization on the continent, there has been a direct relationship between women who have succeeded and those who have been mentioned before. We also have seen that there is a need for specialized support organizations like innovation hubs, incubators, accelerators that specialize on AgTech and help startups understand how to design offerings that meet the needs of farmers, in particular women farmers, that provide startups with better market and business model intelligence. What we also work on is access to markets. We have, for example, as GIZ, a sister program of ours, has supported a Ghanaian startup with access to 1 million farmers that went through a GIZ program, the Farmer Business Schools. And then we also believe that development organizations can help with partnerships between startups, private actors, technology providers, and can also help with the critical access to data by potentially kind of supporting a robust middleware layer that includes farmer registries and other data. And then, of course, there's the access to finance part, where that establishing a dedicated pool of funds for women in AgTech would be necessary to stimulate the growth. Also development should consider incorporating specific impact metrics related to marginalized segments. I'm seeing that my video went off. Let me quickly check that. If I can, yeah, okay, start again. Sorry for that one. And then in the last part, I will quickly show some few examples to our work. So the first one is the Tech by Her program that we implemented together with the Meltwater Entrepreneurial School of Technology, MEST, seated here in Ghana. And the primary goal was to build a strong Africa-wide female founders. And the demo days and also the marketing efforts, we saw that to get access to and investors and help them to be prominent as entrepreneurs, but also for their businesses. And we'd like to kind of see how we can be successful format. It also had gone kind of a crisis with one with deep dive. We invited international investors to get a soft Ghanaian and Nigerian ecosystem and connect them with local investors and our partners from Impact Hub that we implemented it together and managed to have 3 female investors, and one of them actually in the end invested in a female founded AgTech in Ghana. 3 investments that were done as a result of program last year. And example, challenges of AgTech startup on the African continent. Our colleagues implemented and support partnership agreements with AgTech platforms, mainly in Kenya and Nigeria. And what kind of also shows that we implement as Make IT a strong ecosystem approach, where we also work with other partners in the ecosystem. For my in Africa, we should work together as development partners. We at the startup level financing, also in early stage funding. That's the problems in Ghana and many sub-Saharan African countries are. And then at the ecosystem level, need to further strengthen and support the ecosystem support organizations. Last but not least, also kind of work actually on the products of AgTech startups. So that's from my side, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Johanna. Now I'd like to turn it over to Dina as our discussant from the World Bank.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So first I want to say good morning to everyone from the US side. Good evening to others who are here in Asia, and good afternoon to participants in Africa and Europe. So greetings from Singapore. I really wanted to thank all our presenters, well, this evening from my side, for really showing us the amazing possibilities in the exciting realm of AgTech and for being such pioneers in this area. COVID-19, where we're all kind of weathering through, has also been a very important wake-up call for all of us, because it's really exposed a lot of the weaknesses and gaps in our food systems. So you will remember the food supply disruptions that happened when it started in almost all countries where there are food shortages, empty shelves in the supermarkets, while we in the areas where there's farmers, they're there with fruits and vegetables that they cannot harvest because they cannot market them. And this is only in the short term. Now, when we start looking at the long term, there's a lot of, again, challenges, but there are also lots of opportunities. Because what we were told, what we have been, what has been shown is that by 2050, there will be about 10 billion people. And for this 10 billion people, we need to produce 56% more food than we do today. So this is also a great opportunity, because I know, for example, in East Asia, they estimate that the increase in the food market, it will reach 1 trillion by 2030. And when you look at Africa, the predictions are the same, that it will also reach it will become a 1 trillion market by 2030. But the challenge then is, how can we produce more of this food without damaging our planet? And because in many of our countries that we work with, even in the bank, but a lot of the production growth has come at the expense of the deterioration of our natural resources space. So we have a lot of soil degradation, water pollution, groundwater depletion, and further aggravated by climate change. And so how do we handle this? We need to grow more with less. I think some of the technologies, for example, pond seeds, really amazing seeds, would be some of the answers to this one. But we also need to look at how we're able to keep people healthy with a healthier diet. How do we make more diverse and safe foods available and affordable? Because I know, for example, in Indonesia, you have one of the most expensive fruits and vegetables in the whole of Asia. So you want to have a better diet, but you can't afford it. So how do we resolve this issue? So we really need to see how then, the agri-tech and the innovations that come with it can solve this problem, where we have more food, but we also have a healthy planet, and we also have a healthy people. And I really thank Ponzi, Marianne, and Johanna for being the path breakers in this area, and really models for many people. But when you look at agriculture, agriculture is the least digitized, least modern of many sectors. And so the good news is that every country, at least that we are working with now, the ministries of agriculture are now very open. And they really want to capitalize on agri-tech. And then the question is, how do we help them to do this? Now, I think the World Bank, so both in the World Bank and also in IFC, we've been working with a lot of the governments and the ministries of agriculture to begin to develop their digital agriculture strategy, to really open up the environment for agri-tech to grow and to flourish. And we're also working in many of the projects in many of our countries to really mainstream the digital into agriculture, not for the government to do this, but entrepreneurs like Ponzi and Mariana and many others to come in to really make it happen. So they're really very interested in everything from data platforms to how do we link farmers to e-commerce, how do we do e-extension, Uber tractor services, precision agriculture, food safety, traceability systems. They're all very interested in this, and they're really looking to AgTech entrepreneurs to help them. But how do we make this happen? I think that's a big question, and hopefully Ponzi, Mariana, and Giovanna can tell us what more can we do from your perspective to really build the AgriTech system. And then the other challenges I think that we need to deal with is we have millions of very small farmers. How do we help them to access the technologies that are now being developed, whether it be precision agriculture, whether it be improved seeds? And even a question I have for Ponzi is that you have developed seeds that are higher yielding, that can produce more. Can we also work in the future on addressing some of the new threats? One good example for corn is the fall armyworm. It's really devastating corn in Africa, even in Asia. Is there a way we can also develop pest resistance so that the fall, they're not also devastated by fall armyworm? I mean, and for Mariana, my question was, can your system also help us with surveillance? Because we have surveillance not only of the crops, but sometimes you also have outbreaks of livestock diseases. Can we use the same platform that you're using to also monitor what is happening also in like for livestock and food safety or traceability systems? And then I think my final question for all of you, you have been the role models now. What would be your advice for other women tech entrepreneurs who want to follow on your footsteps? What are the 3 things that you would advise them to do to also achieve the success that you have also achieved? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dina. That's a perfect segue into turning this over to Leslie to moderate a discussion and Q&A from you and from people in the audience with our panelists. Thanks, Leslie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bill. Really great to see the questions coming in from the audience and keep them interactive, and we'll accumulate them after this moderated panel. Thank you, Dina, for the great points from the World Bank operations perspective, especially from East Asia Pacific region. And I'm also very touched by the heartwarming story from Bill about your agriculture experience, and extremely grateful to our 3 women leaders who are giving great inspiration about your journey. And in this session, we'll go deeper into the pathway where technology, digital technology, can accelerate the transformation of agri-food system. As Dina mentioned, our World Bank Food System 2030 focuses on healthy people, healthy planet, and healthy economies. I'm particularly interested in the intersection of technology and policy framework in agriculture to transform this sector at scale, and with data and innovation bringing in strategic partnership between public and private sector stakeholders. So today I'm extremely honored to moderate this panel of great women founders and pioneers. It took me a couple of months when we thought about having an inaugural webinar on this topic, and I personally spoke to about 50 outstanding women leaders around the world. They were hard to find, but I think we found some of the best. And today I'm so delighted to hear your story. And I'd like to go a little deeper into your backstory and what inspired you to be the pioneers in AgTech. We'll start with Ponzi.
Thank you, Leslie. By the way, before I start on anything, I think the other way around, I'm highly inspired by your story, Leslie. It's really impressed getting to know you and learn about what you have achieved and what you have done. So really inspiring. Thank you. Would you like me to touch on how the journey came about?
Yeah, your more from your personal perspective, because I've read a lot about your story and the audience may not know. So I'd love to get that that story from your background and what got you into agriculture at such a deep level.
Right. Thanks for that. It actually didn't hit me hard until roughly around 9 years ago that the agriculture hit me hard there. So a little bit of background, I was born in Thailand and I grew up in California and some parts of Asia. So back and forth. Yes, we do have some background in agriculture, but not corn, soy, other crops. And the piece that actually struck me, and it was with the big ag before in my career, 9 years ago, it struck me as I visited part of Indonesia outside of roughly around 5 hours outside of Jakarta, and met a gentleman who is a corn grower. My best guess would be he would be roughly around 75 years old. And then he came in and he said that thanks so much for bringing in technologies. During that time, it was pretty much hybrid corn seeds. So he was able to increase from 2 tons a hectare to 7 tons a hectare. And he was saying that he was able for the first time to be able to essentially get a cattle for his family. And then my colleague actually corrected that it was in Bahasa, corrected that no, that's not what he meant. He meant that it was the first time that he was able to bring meat to his family for the first time from the economies that he got from higher yield. That's when, for me, is whatever that I have done in my life. What I know at that moment was I'll be in agriculture for the rest of my life, and that brings me to the purpose of if Dina, you asked the question about if I want to leave something to all of you. I know that everyone is intellectually smart. There's some difference, but not much among all of us. But the heart would be the difference. The purpose, the belief, what we are trying to do with the food system, with the world. Because in reality of doing a startup, you got to be resilient, and you'll find one thing I know for sure is you're going to fall down. The question is how many times, which is not really the key question. The question is how quick can you get back up? So that's really important for the entrepreneurship. And that purpose, the face of that gentleman essentially pretty much brought me up in matter of minutes rather than matter of days when you face the challenges.
Great story. Thank you so much for sharing that kind of very personal moments that changes your perspective, and it becomes a very an important higher purpose pursuit. So I also wanted to turn it over to Mariana, because you also share some amazing stories with me in our preparation calls, and you have a family of farmers as well. So what inspired you to get into agriculture?
Yes, and I think like what is interesting about my story is like I didn't want to be in the farm, right? Because our parents that are farmers, usually they raise you to go outside and do something better. No one wants you to stay in farming. They want you to do something else. So I went to study business. I went to work for the industry and work technology. And at some point it hit me like, why I'm not doing this, and these kinds of technologies like the industrial revolution that has been developed in the industry to agriculture that we know so well by the problem side, like being on the problem side and in seeing how they struggle to make decisions to adapt. And for Brazil, it has a very important relevance on the economy, right? Like it's a big part of our economy. And as a Latin person, it's very hard to position as a technology maker, right? Like we are not recognized by being the technology makers of the world. So if you want to create a global company, it's quite challenging to get there. And while in agriculture, we are the largest producer and exporter of many crops. So we thought we could be respected. And if we managed to come out in Brazil from a subsistence agriculture in the 70s and become this powerhouse, why couldn't we do that aggregating value with technology? So I think, like Ponzi said, is when I found my purpose. It's like I managed to find something in my reality, because before farming was boring. And like, why could I do that? I didn't want that neither. It's like, then the point where I was able to connect the technology, my world, my universe with my roots, that's when I found my purpose, and I really got committed on changing the food system for everyone, not only for my family. And I see now as an essential role for many succession, because succession is a problem in farms, and it has been a bridge, like the digital, the agri-tax has been a bridge for many daughters and sons of farmers that are coming back to fields and creating companies, or at least leading the digital transformation.
Great story. Thank you so much for sharing that very personal touch. I wanted to kind of go deeper into the agriculture business problem and tech innovations from a gender perspective. I'm also passing it over to Johanna, because you have been sharing a lot of great stories from the entrepreneurs. What advice would you give them, especially on the ground in Ghana right now?
Yes, thank you. As I said earlier with McGetty, we strongly follow an ecosystem approach. So there is an African saying that says it takes a village to raise a child, and then we say it takes an ecosystem to raise a startup. So it really depends on the support that startups can also get from ecosystem support organizations, from hubs, applying for incubation, for acceleration, from also different partners, both in Ghana and then also on a Pan-African level, because what we have also seen is that the exchange also on the continent between different countries is very important. And then seek, apart from the support from incubators and accelerators, seek support from a mentor from the industry that can help to open access to networks. That very briefly from my side would be the main advices.
Thank you so much. Actually, you touch upon a very important topic around having mentors. I'd like to also turn it over to both Ponzi and Mariana about who have been your mentors in this space.
For me, several. The first one is don't be specific about it. Yes, in my previous job in the big ag, I would argue that I had 5 at the same time, and that would be the advice, that don't stick with 1 or 2, because you need different perspectives. I try to actually do it from the perspective of diversity in terms of the thoughts. So yes, couple of them were my line managers actually, and then couple of them are more sort of peers. Having peers as mentor is a good thing as well, and very important. I always look for the mentor outside of the company, so outside of the usual suspect. And that's essentially how I go about it.
Great. What about Mariana?
I had my first mentor coming out of university, and it was very important, like in the beginning of my entrepreneurial life. My university created a program connecting alumni students that were well positioned in the market with last year graduates. So it was really nice. And then she still follows me up to today. She introduced me to other mentors that were also her mentors. So I think it was very important to me to be connected and to have inspiring. I met many women in my life that, even though we sometimes don't have a formal mentorship relationship, I see them as role models, and they keep motivating me and they find me the ways. I even remember having a breakfast with Ponzi where she also served as like a mentorship conversation when I was raising and so on. So I think like the support network itself, it's very important for women growth in general, not only in agriculture, but in any tech or male-dominated industry.
I can relate, because in the tech space, there's so fewer women out there, and therefore we kind of come together to help each other, men and women in many cases. But I love your approach and how you get into that space of networking in a very authentic and organic way. So I want to kind of get into the more development impact space, and wanted to ask Johanna, from your perspective in AgTech and developing and emerging markets point of view, could you share some of your thoughts?
Sorry, could you possibly rephrase the question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. So you have been in Africa for quite some time, and you've devoted a lot of time in the developing and emerging markets. I'd like to get your thoughts on the AgTech perspective in these countries, because we're trying to figure out what is the code to crack to get more women AgTech in around the world. But then you have unique experience from GIZ to offer in this space, and love to get your thoughts on this.
Yes, thank you. Connectivity sometimes also is a challenge, even in African capitals like Accra. So thanks for that. So there are specific challenges and opportunities from our perspective. So as also really started to elaborating earlier, most farmers and agricultural workers use methods for farming, and then there are 60% of farmers on the continent, smallholder farmers. So but then luckily the rate of adoption is going up, and what we've also seen in 2019 that was described in AgTech space with notable rounds mainly in Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, with all in all $60 million US, which is high for the African continent and not so high on other continents. But we also see that many AgTech startups in Africa address well-known problems in the sector, like advisory services, market access, small farmers, organizational storage, financial services, of course, a very important topic. But yeah, we do have on the user side, specifically for those products that farmers still a lot of challenges when it comes to connectivity, literacy, and so startups struggle hard to become kind of broadly effective and to reach users. And this is why, for example, in Ghana, many of the AgTech startups remain still kind of in an early stage and struggle hard to grow.
Thank you so much for your perspective. I also wanted to ask about what kind of what's the role the government can play in terms of policies and that could help provide more enabling environment for female founders in AgTech. Any of you who can chime in to share some of your thoughts.
I'll start. I'll see it in two parts, and I'm not sure whether it's only for female, but it's probably for any entrepreneur for the AgTech. The first part is around the funding. In general, that in agriculture, outside of the IoT, a lot of things are actually taking longer to get to the profitability. As we know that the season, we can't control the season. Some parts of the world it's only once a year. So in order to actually arrive at the products, it takes longer than other industries. How would the funding go about from the public or private or governmental sectors, whether there are special kind of funding that would help support the agriculture industry in general? Then once it's up and running, whether as the whole parties of public perspective or private perspective in terms of thinking about the economics of it. Is there the part that you could think about the premium because of the food system challenge that these companies can address? Whether, Diana, you mentioned about this piece on the trying to help address the challenge with the carbon footprint, try to address the problem of water reduction or fertilizer reduction. So is there a way that you could argue that there's a premium on those? Because what these startups are trying to do is not only about net zero, arguably we're trying to get to the net positive.
Good point.
I totally agree with Ponzi. I think funding is a big issue. Like there's very few people willing to enter in agriculture, as like there's a taboo. It's not the traditional SaaS company that VCs are used to. And we actually need patient capital because the timings are different and the digital transformation is happening very slow, while the expectations of the VC just doesn't match. So you have many, like the majority of the startups stuck in the same stage of development, and it's very hard and expensive to grow. It's offline, the market is offline, it's distributed. So arriving to the farmer is very expensive and the access is centralized in the hands of the big corporations. So I think like creating more bridges where we can access that market and having more financing lines, both for funding like an equity money, but also finance line for the farmers, because the access for them, many times they cannot remove from their day-to-day operations to make an investment and wait for the return of the investment. And I also think like we need a push on making impact scalable. So I think there's many technologies that are already proven, just like as Ponzi showed, I showed here, but we still see that people are trying to position in AgTech for marketing purpose. So like either governments or big corporations like, oh, I'm doing something, so I am already on the hot topic of the time, I'm trendy, and that's it. So I do a pilot, I do a use case, and that's it. And very few are actually deploying them in scale. And if we are able to prove the results, why we're not investing to have faster to scale it up to the whole supply chain? Because the results we want, the net positive, the SDGs, or the 2030 objectives are reachable. We just have to deploy it, and we are not finding like real commitment to deploy. So I think on the policy making side, it's also demanding from those corporations that they all not only have a commitment or policies from being sustainable, but actually demanding the numbers and demanding the results, because that will push them to have things to show. And on the agriculture minister side is the same thing. There's lots of interest. We talk to many governments, but very few are willing to do the change and deploy the project. So how they can be doing that for, you asked about surveillance. No, so in general, in irrigation, for example, very simple. No, you need a water license to irrigate. And today, like it could be a requirement that for obtaining a water license, you have some kind of irrigation management systems. And to include everyone, the smallholders, you need financing lines and everything else to ensure that it's reachable. So I think we are still too much like an audience. Everyone says they are aware, everyone wants a better world, but very few people put the work we need to make this change happen.
Great plea for help. And this is a very, I've heard this perspective from quite a few AgTech women founders as well, and men founders. And so I think this is something that we really need to go at it more systemically. I really appreciate you for raising these key points for food for thoughts, no pun intended. Now let's turn the question to the audience. I've seen there's a lot of questions coming in, and my colleague has been very helpful in clustering them. So the first one came from Xin Yi from Pinduoduo. Which type of farmers that you serve at Inari for the, let me see, which type of farmers that service or target, and which crops, and what is the business model about how you are able to achieve the cost advantage of 10 cents and 10% of costs?
Yeah, thank you for the question there. So our business model is we want to be able to scale it as fast as we can. So we are not selling it directly to farmers. we're selling it to independent seed companies, meaning that we provide parent seeds to independent seed companies. There are roughly around 120 of them in the US. Right now, we currently are only in the US. And independent seed companies around the world are more than 300 there. So the intention is, yes, we're providing parent seeds, and independent seed companies would then bulk it up into the normal seeds and bring that seeds to the farmers, as well as providing the service. And the logic of having this model, because it allows us to scale fast, number one, and number two is these independent seed companies, the question is it small or large farmers? It's all, but the beauty of it is these independent seed companies actually touch on the smaller farmers than the typical route of the large companies, large seed companies there. So that's the business model there. Currently, we're focusing on corn and soybeans in the US. And coming back to the second question of Shinyi around how do you get to the 10% of the cost and 1/3 of the time? If I could rewind it a little bit, there are two existing technologies at the moment when it comes to genetics of seeds. One is breeding, which is crossing male and female. Breeding normally takes 10 years to develop one variety. And on average, the yield benefit is less than 1% yield increase a year. Second is GMO, which is about inserting foreign gene into the plant. The regulatory system is rather long, so it takes altogether from development to product is 15 years, $200 million a product. So when you put that together, the technology that we are doing here is the multiplex editing, which essentially the software part that I was talking about, it allows us to sequence and understand the genome of the crops in detail, knowing exactly which genome that we would like to make the changes in a precise way. And we touch only natural genes. We're not touching any foreign genes into the crop at all. So that's essentially allowing us to be able to work on multiple genes at the same time, which are required to solve the real problem of the food system, which are water reduction, fertilizer reduction, and the productivity, i.e. yield. One gene like GMO cannot solve the problem of water reduction or yield or fertilizer reduction.
Thank you so much. Next questions for Mariana. Targeting smallholders or commercial farmers, revenue sources and business models, including how they work with banks. How do the IoT devices work, including use of cloud for data processing, challenges in introducing this to smallholder farmers and female farmers in particular? Can you work on developing a farmer business network? Is business model primarily dependent on non-farmer players?
Okay, so let's go. Let's start from the beginning. We managed to engage the smallholder farms by working a lot on the UX and UI. So make it very simple. Like we usually, with them, we interface only with the WhatsApp alerts. So like they only receive a direct message on exactly what they should do because they're heavily on WhatsApp in general. And for the agronomists, for the food chain, for the cooperatives or government, that's where we have the more elaborate reports. So rural extension is important to be combined with technology to reach out to them and finding a business model that works. We today have like 50% we work directly with farmers, and those are medium to large farms, and 50% we work with the corporations, and the corporations are the ones that helps us to tackle the smallholders, but they are the ones subsiding or paying entirely for the solution. And the way that works, like it's an annual subscription fee. So they hire a service, like a recurrent fee, where we have different bundles. They can choose like just weather forecast or seasonal imagery or sensors. They can view the package, and what they consume, you create their annual subscription plan for both farmers and corporations. About the IoT, we do the processing in the cloud. So we ensure the data from the sensor where we won't have the internet send the data to the cloud. We process it in the cloud. And then we deliver in very small packages of messages directly to the WhatsApp, so they can access when they're in the city, or usually in their house, there's some kind of rural antenna, but not in the field itself. Or in the more developed farmers, they have internet and they can actually access like their app in their smartphone or in their computer, and so on. Did I miss any, Leslie? Is there anything else that I missed on answering? Because I think, Farmers Business Network. Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity. We are moving with Farmers Market with our first acquisition of an Argentinian company that has one of the largest user base of farmers in Latin America. And the idea there is to evolve. We're already a platform as a hub of services, no? So like we are able to engage with those farmers to distribute services that can be algorithms, sensors, credit, or any input need that they might need. But then we also can talk to them and go back to the corporations delivering carbon credits or suppliers that like now we are moving to plant-based in many of the supply chains, and we are missing some crops. So with the climate resilient thing, where we can find farmers that have a checklist that are able to supply to the industry. So we are able to go back with that. So it's not exactly the Farmer Business Network model, but we can do something similar, and we are looking into it.
Excellent, great. Next up for Johanna, are there myths or stereotypes about female founders in AgTech that you have to address?
Yes, thank you. So there are a number of myths about females in AgTech, being that mainly it's kind of very discouraging that female founders will find it very difficult to thrive because the industry is the agricultural industry is labor intensive, the tech industry is not. So it's assumed that males are more skilled, and as such, that discouraging for females that have to fight through, overcome these myths and stereotypes.
Great, thank you. I also have a question from the audience for Ponzi about specific example of a crop where technology has been applied and impact on water use and pest management.
Could you clarify a little bit, Leslie, that this is technology in general, not specifically for Inari? Is that correct?
This is coming from the audience. I'm not sure who would have asked that question. Maybe they can be more specific about that.
Yeah. In general, while we're waiting for it, the pest management, yes, we see a lot, and that's the purpose of the GMO, and that's the single gene that could have the resistance to the insects. The disease one so far, it hasn't been something that the GMO is addressing that yet. That part, we continue to see the breeding as the technology to address it, as well as crop protection on the fungicide side. This is, we also see that the gene editing would be closer to helping to address the diseases part in terms of the pest management. Water is trickier, actually, because this is a complex problem that involves more than 60 genes. So far, some of the breeding program is trying to address it, but haven't really seen like the solid progress of those yet. Would see more in terms of the closed loop area on the control area when you get into the glass house, those kind of thing, whether you manage the certain pieces. So it's still limited there in terms of the water.
Okay, thank you. Pamesh, perhaps you might want to join the discussion and ask some questions or add some comments.
Thanks, Leslie, and thanks everyone for a great presentation. I just wanted to ask you that you are working currently in a particular geography with more concentrated way. So I find that both your approaches are more generic, which could be applied across geographies. So what would it take for you to take the approach? Because you are working on a fundamental disruptive way of doing things. If you were to go from the geographies like Mariana, if you go outside Brazil and do it all across the other geographies, how would you go about doing it, and what would motivate you to go there? And same with Ponzi is that you have developed this approach in a particular geography soybean growers? If you were going to other countries with the same crops, how would you go about it?
Perhaps I can start if you want. I think on our side, being from a tropical country is an advantage because Brazil has huge dimensions and we have so many microclimates within our own country. We work over like 33 crops. So we had to build our product generic enough so it would work in Brazil. And it happens that there is many regions outside in Peru, in Colombia, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, that have very similar conditions and infrastructure and microclimate to Brazil regions. So we are able to transfer the knowledge enough. And like all the software is built parameterized by the crops, which they work with more than 33 crops in 9 countries. So like it's very easy to adapt. It was made thinking of that. We already have many preset configurations because we already work in many different conditions. But if something completely new, we would need like some partnership or alliance to understand that local crop and that local conditions. So we can insert in the software, but it's completely customized. And that's why we are looking for growing global. Like we have worked apart from Latin America in the US and Israel, but we actually see a huge potential to expanding to Asia and Africa, where we think there's more similar conditions being in emerging countries to the ones we have in Latin America.
Great, great. Are there any comments for that question from Ponzi or Johanna?
Very briefly for us, the technologies are applicable to all the geography, tropical or temperate genetics there. For us, it's just a matter of time and the focus. But certainly, we're planning to get into Latin America pretty soon. So that's essentially it's the technology has no limit there.
Excellent. What about Johanna?
Just maybe very short, that from our perspective, of course, there are kind of big differences, but then also some similarities between different African countries. So this is why we kind of look specifically at activities that we do at the Pan-African level, both kind of on the startup support, on kind of also bringing different ecosystem players together, but then also on the level of governments, looking at kind of some Pan-African approaches. And when we work with startups, yes, we do kind of encourage also the cooperation between different startups in different countries to kind of see if a grow into other markets can be done also together. And that's something we have seen. We have done an accelerator program last year with Airbus on remote sensing and drone technology, and have seen that there has been a great potential for different startups from different countries to work together across different markets.
Great. Well, thank you. Bill, do you have any questions for the speakers?
I have one question, which is I was kind of interested when I think about Mariana increasing yields in Brazil by 20%, Ponzi increasing yields by 20% in the US, Ponzi thinking about moving to Latin America, the connectivity Mariana has with farmers that she's developing in Latin America. I see a potential partnership in the making, and people like IFC would be interested in investing to help make something like that happen, including taking Mariana to Africa or Southeast Asia. So as you guys think about that you have developed a pseudo mentorship, Mariana and Ponzi, is there a commercial business way that you can cooperate to? I think Dina said we need 50% more food. I do the math and you guys will create 40% more working together. So that's my question.
Maria, I'll go first. Please, Bill, on. Certainly, Bill, thanks for that question. From probably Maria, I think the same way that the success of our 2 companies would be that we see more companies coming into industry. That would be the real success of us. That we don't think that we're going to be alone to be able to solve the food system challenge. It's so big and has so many angles, not only, as you said, that not only about healthy planet is not only about healthy people, it's not healthy health, and then healthy economics. So yes, we'll love to contribute to keep the relationship with Mariana. So and others as well. That's the network that we when we have it, we keep it for quite a long time.
On my side, I think we strongly believe in ecosystem, and working together is the best way to change in the world. So we have an open platform and an API where we can exchange data with many other players to empower their solutions and have our solutions as well to grow with support of others. So I'm happy to talk to Ponce. There's a long time we don't catch up actually. When she was in Indigo, we did work with Indigo and we had some work together to make it bigger, and perhaps now with Nari, we have been working with some genetic companies, as our data can certainly feed their insights on what kind of genes perform better under certain conditions. And once they have good genetic materials, we can on real-time monitoring support the best usage of the seed. So I'm happy to explore that, and I would love to be closer to IFC to these and other partnerships and entering new markets.
Great. Well, Bill, I'm sorry, would you like to follow on with that point?
Over to you, Leslie. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to find these kind of opportunity to really bring it together. I like to kind of, before I hand it over to Bill for the closing remark, forward looking into the future. If you have the crystal ball, what would you like to see happen in the future? Anyone?
I would like to see the debate of this meeting is actually debate about the success. We have come to the success of creating the healthy people, healthy planet, and healthy economics. It's already successful. And the discussion will then be around how to celebrate that. I would love to see that, the celebration of this call.
Thank you. Well said. Mariana, over to you.
I love her point. I think I want to see the technology usage and the sustainable food production a mainstream. But I still think they are like shiny use cases that are promising, but it's not yet the main, the one you go to every farm and you see it.
Great. Any closing remarks from Johanna?
Yes, I would love to see in the next webinar that would be held on the topic, an African female also presenting the great success she has had with AgTech on the continent, having solved some of the challenges around data, and also having developed business models that also target specifically female farmers on the African continent.
We definitely take that feedback, and this is as the beginning of a series of AgTech for women leadership. So we'll definitely take your suggestions and the input from you and the rest of other folks who are part of this event together. Thank you so much for the amazing interaction and also sharing your insights. With that, I want to hand it over to Bill for the closing remarks. Thank you so much, Bill. Take it away.
Thank you, Leslie. This was a fantastic discussion of a great group of women leaders thinking about women in ag tech, but really touching on many other aspects of kind of global food supply and the need for ecosystems, and even touching on improvements the World Bank Group needs to do on digital infrastructure to increase access and accessibility of data to drive future improvements. I mean, we learned, Ponzi, about Inari and how you're non-using GMO, but CRISPR technology to alter within the DNA of a seed to dramatically increase productivity of, for example, a soybean. So I will be shorting soybeans in the commodities market with the success of your technology. Mariana, unbelievable story of, coming from parents that were farmers to now thinking about how you're combining technology to increase productivity, reduce use of water, and really bring to the new age agriculture productivity in a country like Brazil, where it is so important to exports and to GDP. Johanna, your work at GIZ is fascinating in terms of really trying to transform the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Africa, but doing so with a focus on how we increase female entrepreneurship. You know, we at IFC co-authored a study just last year looking about globally in emerging markets, women going into accelerators. They've been going into accelerators around 50% of the participation, but when it comes out of the accelerator, who gets seed funding? Only 20 or 30% of those women actually get seed funding, and when they do, it's typically much lower than men. And so we're focused on how we fix that conundrum, and it's something we all have to join together. Dina, your work within the Ag, GP within the World Bank, and your connectivity to governments and agricultural ministers, and understanding that there is this now big desire and need to think about digitization of agricultural production and using modern technology to increase food supply and increase access to finance, and therefore farmers' incomes is so valuable, and it ties really closely with entrepreneurs that are trying to attack this from the private sector point of view. And Leslie, you moderated an unbelievable conversation, and it was great to hear the touching stories of what drives each of our panelists. And I appreciate the audience participation in Q&A. So thank you all for attending today, and I'll be in touch with Mariana and Ponce to figure out how we put this thing together. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.